Hey everyone, we want to welcome you to our podcast today. We are going to continue on our podcast about water.
And you don't want to miss this one.
Hey, we'll be right back.
Hi everyone, I'm Melinda Boyer and I want to welcome you back to our show. I am so excited. The last show that Don did with Greg, the Hydrogen Man, was incredible. And I'm so excited to sit here next to you because the knowledge that he has is just off the charts. So I want to start with John 7:37. In the last days, the great day of the feast, Jesus stood and cried, saying, "If any man thirst, let him come into me and drink." And this is something that we have been sitting here talking about, and I'm just so excited about the whole thing because between the stars, the earth, the dirt, the water, the hydrogen, I mean, it's just so incredible. And there's so many things that you were talking to Don about. And I want to start with your favorite verse. And I'm going to let you start there, and then we'll go from there.
Yeah, my favorite one is, "And the voice of God is like the sound of many waters."
Wow. Now, did you hear that? Of many waters. You know, so we were talking about gold and silver. Let's start there, and then I want to kind of veer into health in the water, okay, and how it actually is really helping you and how it can help other people. So most people think, okay, when you go for gold, you're panning for gold and you think it's in the water, right? But in fact, you said something else that I thought was pretty incredible. So I'll let you tell that story.
So I was asking you, where do you think gold is made? And basically, if you do the research, you'll find out that it's basically being made in the stars, in what they would call a supernova, like a dying star. And gold, that's literally where it's being made. And what are stars basically made of? They're basically hydrogen, and they're also helium, but helium is just hydrogen that's gone through the process of fusion. And so that's what the stars are pretty much made of, almost entirely.
So why do you think that people have to go underground and really dig up that gold?
I think ultimately the gold basically, it rained down upon the earth and embedded itself within the soil, and you can go find it, but ultimately where it was made appears to be that it was made in the stars. And what are the stars made of? Hydrogen. So it's like kind of crazy because you're thinking, well, it was made from hydrogen. And again, if you look at the periodic table, it's the number one thing on that periodic table. And it continues to bring me back to when Moses asked God what his name was, and he said, "I am what I am." And I see hydrogen the way, almost like Legos. It can become anything. You can turn it into anything. And it is almost like the purest, simplest form. And even water is kind of in a very simple, pure form. I mean, we're made of water, but I don't look like a glass of water, right? I mean, you know, I'm human, and I've even thought about all the fluids in our body from our stomach acids.
When we work out, right, we're sweating.
That too.
So it's water.
All sorts of fluids, but it all starts, with water as a foundation, and hydrogen appears to me that it is that foundation. It's the simplest form, and sometimes the simplest thing is, the easiest answer. Like when they asked Jesus, if you could simplify all your teachings, and if you could just put it into like one sentence, what would it be, Jesus? And he said, "Love one another as I have loved you." It was really simple, and sometimes that's the best answer, is simplicity.
Well, I kind of want to talk about the whole water intake, because we were talking a little bit about Don with that, of how much water, if you drink too much water, you can actually drown yourself, right? And people have done that.
Yeah.
But if you think about it, they tell you, oh, you got to drink so many ounces of water every day, right? But then when you're drinking hydrogen water, it's a different, you feel full after.
Yeah, hydrogen water is a little different, but you still have to follow the guidelines of water, because what you're actually doing is you're taking water and you're dissolving a gas into the water. I think the best way for people to understand is, and it was done by God, by the way, I can explain it in many ways. So, for example, if somebody looks at carbonated water, that's a different gas, though. That's CO2, and it's been dissolved into the water. What we're doing with hydrogen is we're dissolving pure hydrogen gas, which I stumbled upon on the medical research. But again, like Don said, we're just understanding God's ways, really. Right. And so we're dissolving that particular gas into the water. And even as we breathe, right now we're breathing in our atmosphere, we breathe about 21% oxygen. We're dissolving that gas, oxygen, into our blood. That's why when they put like an oximeter on your finger, like if you're at a doctor's office,
Right.
they're measuring oxygen saturation levels. You're saturating a gas within a liquid, which is your blood. Your blood is like water. And so God designed gases to be able to be in liquids, basically. It's all by design, and it's quite beautiful and simple. And have you ever stared into one of these glasses where you see carbonation and it looks like the gas is coming from nowhere, just from the bottom?
Right from the
and
bottom.
I'm just
bubbles
staring
up.
at it and like, where is this coming from?
Well, that's what I do with the hydrogen, right? Because I'm like, wow, look at all those bubbles. But it's really exciting because not only can you drink this, right?
Yeah.
I mean, when we first got it, I used to just love just to sit there and put my little, because it
Cannula?
Yeah, so I put my little oxygen piece on, right? And I sit there and I just breathe it in,
Yep.
and afterwards it felt like I had a gym workout. You go work out really hard,
Yeah.
and then you have that clarity afterwards. That's exactly how I felt after. So it was kind of interesting to see how that worked, right? Not only was I drinking the water, but I
Yes.
was inhaling it also, which really I felt very clean after.
Yeah.
So explain that just a little bit of how that really works when you're drinking the water and you're also breathing it.
It's interesting too, because I think of hydrogen not only as life, but also light. Because again, the stars, and we need light.
Right.
If we don't have light, we're dead in the water, actually. We need the sun. We need the light of the world. And when we take in hydrogen, I actually think that we're taking in light. What's interesting about the inhalation versus drinking the water is although they have a lot of similarities for our health, there are still differences. And the water, if I had to choose one, I have to pick the water foundationally, and then the inhalation. In fact, I created a protocol that later out turned out to be true from some preliminary research, that I created a protocol where you drink the water first and then you inhale after,
Right.
and it appeared to enhance the benefits even more. And actually what I discovered is that when you properly hydrate, everything works better. Even your nutrient absorption, that's actually one of the biggest problems as you age, that you have problems with nutrient absorption. And a lot of it has to just do with dehydration. I believe that it's one of the reasons, like when you go to the doctor's office, they want to put you on an IV, for example, to get you hydrated,
Right.
because no matter what they're going to give you, everything works better when you're hydrated. And the very first research actually in Japan was done on the mitochondria. And the mitochondria, a lot of people are starting to discover that a lot of medical issues have to do with mitochondrial dysfunction. And this particular scientist in Japan who was a mitochondrial specialist, he wasn't a hydrogen specialist. He was seeing the effect on it, and it had a profound effect on the mitochondria. And what people need to understand about the mitochondria has everything to do with what you just said a second ago, which is that it's for your energy. It's to produce energy. And that's one of the things that if you want to get real pure energy, not a caffeine, not a sugar, because that's the crazy part about hydrogen. There's 0 calories, no sugar, but yet it functions as an antioxidant. I've never seen anything on planet Earth that functions as an antioxidant that doesn't give you some form of calorie. You get antioxidants maybe from fruits or vegetables, but I've never seen anything that can give it to you with 0 calories, 0 sugar, 0 nothing, except for hydrogen. I've never seen anything like it.
You said something really interesting in the other show with Don, is you were talking about the babies, how plump they are, right? And I want to talk about that a little bit because I think it's really important. And I want to see your perspective on this because nowadays, as we get older, there's inflammation, right? And
Yes.
our bodies blow up, right? And when you say it was plump, and it's good when when the babies are born, they're plump because they're hydrated, right?
Yes.
Well, now that we get older, we're getting plump because we're either dehydrated, and we have all this inflammation in our bodies. And I just kind of want to see what your perspective is on that, and how you can actually help or tell people how to help themselves and get all that plumpness that we have in our body out, right?
I think there's a difference between, like, for example, you could be like, yeah, I want to get water everywhere. Well, no, you don't want water in your lungs, for example, right? And there's many different types of waters in the body. Even the spinal fluid, for example, that goes along, the spinal fluid is different than your blood, for example. I think it really depends not only on where the water's going, because I think the key is actually the movement of water. In fact, if we look at when Jesus got baptized, I don't think anybody realizes this, and I don't want to push any people's buttons, but I've seen people be baptized, let's say, for example, in not a bucket of water, but like a pool of water. Was Jesus baptized in a pool of water? No, he was baptized in a river. What do we know about rivers? It's moving water. Movement is life. And one of the other interesting things that I discovered about hydrogen water, this was from actually a lab test done in Japan. They were given a woman, they were doing a live blood analysis, and they tested her first with no water. Then they gave her really clean spring water, which was great. Did it create a difference in her blood? A little bit, not a ton. Then they specifically gave her that same exact water after putting it through this device, actually, of all the lab tests that they did, because this is the number one machine in all of Japan.
They put the spring water in there.
They put the spring water in here and saturated it with hydrogen. And then they gave it to the woman, did the live blood analysis. It was unbelievable. Her blood was moving like a river. There was so much life. Wow. There was so much movement. And a lot of times when we get swollen, we need movement. We need, this is kind of maybe too graphic, but we need bowel movements. You need to move the water through your body and through your kidneys and, pee, basically. Right. You need the movement. And hydrogen creates that movement. It's so much energy. It's interesting, too, that a lot of times they call hydrogen active hydrogen because it's so active. There's so much energy. And I believe that it can be always, like most things, it can be used for good, or it could also be used in negative ways. I don't even know if we should really bring up the whole hydrogen bomb, that they used it in a very negative way. Right. But if you can harness that energy and use it for good, the way, for example, that the Japanese did for our health, because we're energy and we need a certain amount of energy. And sometimes you kind of have to regulate that. And hydrogen seems to be, from what I've seen, the great balancer. Right. And it really brings a lot of good balance to the body and that healing. So I don't know if that really answers your question, but...
Well, what I thought was so interesting about the machine was not only was it bubbling really nice, right? But there's a blue light in there.
Yes.
And I thought it was kind of interesting because to me, the first thing that I thought was, wow, this is like air bubbles, right? So it's the air, it's the water, and it's the light.
Yep.
Right? So it really spoke to me, and just like that. It's the water, the air, the light. So when I thought about that, I was like, wow, okay, not only are you getting the water that you need for your body, but you're getting the air that you need for your blood to move, right? Mm-hmm. And you also need the light that we have inside of us. Mm-hmm. So it's all of that all in one. But when you're drinking regular water, right? There's none of that in there. I mean, you don't see that, but in this you do. So it really kind of made me think that this water is very, very different from a lot of people, from what a lot of people are drinking on a regular basis, right? And I think that one of the things that I would like for you to kind of explain is how does that really help our bodies when we drink it? And what does it do to us as an individual when we're drinking it? Because this is different.
Yeah, in a lot of ways I call it living water because, again, the hydrogen creates movement. Movement is life. Also the light. You're talking about the light. And we talked about the stars and all the light that they bring. And interestingly enough, in the world of science, they use blue to depict the color of hydrogen, which is why you see the blue lights on this. And they use oxygen depicted as red. Which to me, oftentimes red is associated sometimes even with like the devil, for example, red. And as I was telling you before, red, to me, oxygen is death because it oxidizes. If you oxidize metal, it'll turn to dust and, it'll just oxidize. And I think, though, also that death is required for life, but in balance. It reminds me of a Bible verse. I believe it's one about farming. I believe it's where you're supposed to give like 10% of the crop back to the soil because if we understood how to do proper farming, that there's a little bit of death that is required, a little bit, because we need oxygen. It's pretty clear that we need it. But I think that we have lost sight of what hydrogen can really do in balancing together with all this. But just like water is primarily made actually of hydrogen. And then it's made of a little oxygen. And so I just think that these two things are really important to understand. And then in the future, I've been told, I'm going to share something with you today that it's been preliminary. And it's really, really new data out of Japan. Nobody knows actually yet, only very few scientists, that there appears to be a relationship between light and the way that it affects certain gases. And hydrogen appears to be affected by blue.
Oh, that's
Hence the reason
interesting.
they use the blue.
Yeah.
And what's interesting about that is, look at the sky. What color is it?
Blue.
It's typically blue.
Yeah.
And so all these, the way that they all correlate, and then of course when you look at the sun, to me the sun is like gold. I mean, it's like this
right.
beautiful color. And that, I don't know why it always reminds me of the heart. What do they say? Heart of gold?
Yeah, right.
And then we talk about where gold's made of already in the stars. So
the stars.
all these things seem to really correlate together. And I think all we're really doing is trying to understand God more.
Yeah,
And how we can utilize that to help others, which is why I'm always grateful to be able to have a platform where I can share this information, because I know it helps people. I've seen it. I've been doing this for like a decade.
Well, this reminds me of the whole verse of the very beginning of when God blew into Adam.
Yep.
Right? What was he blowing into Adam?
Boy, I got a theory on this, actually. I'm really glad you asked this one, because when we inhale oxygen. Hydrogen, we're actually not inhaling it. In fact, we actually produce it in our bodies. But when you exhale, so in Japan, when they do certain studies, they're actually testing the hydrogen that you exhale. You exhale hydrogen. So whether the voice of God or the breath of God, and if hydrogen is life, did he blow hydrogen into us to bring us life? I don't know, but that was one of my theories. Because he didn't inhale, he exhaled. He blew into us.
Yeah, so, and that's really interesting because, from what I understand, or what I understood, was that when we're exhaling, it's not good.
Well, we exhale a lot of different gases.
Yeah.
And I was actually recently tested. I was sharing this with you guys a little bit offline here, and they were testing the gases that are coming out of my mouth. And I actually tested off the charts. They probably would have to develop new equipment to see how far I can go, but nobody had ever tested that to that extreme.
Wow.
And I've been utilizing a lot of what I would call God's methods to transform my health. And I never thought in a million years that I was transforming the gases that were coming out of my mouth. And apparently I am. And I believe a lot of it has to do with hydrogen. I mean, we know, by the way, through science, how much hydrogen affects our gut microbiome and the gases that it produces. And so it's all very fascinating learning more about God in that way.
Yeah.
But I hope that we can continue to learn more. And I'm very grateful for all the research also that the Japanese have done that are benefiting all of mankind. As you know, there's that verse that says we will know a tree by the fruit it bears. And I think that they have really brought something very beautiful to us. And for that, I am grateful.
Well, I think it not only is it the water that you're drinking, but I think it has a lot to do of how pure that you eat as well.
Absolutely.
And you were talking a little bit about how you eat, and you do eat meat or fish, none at all.
No, I don't eat it. I haven't eaten meat for over a decade. And I know that's very controversial for people, but I just follow the science and the data. And if anything, it reminds me of Daniel.
Yes.
Who wanted nothing but vegetables.
Right.
And when I was going off the data, and it turned out not only that I was right, but the Japanese actually proved it recently. The fibers within vegetables, so the fiber that's naturally in them, not a fiber supplement, you get it from your food the way God intended it. And the fiber within vegetables is actually very unique and magical. And so I implemented that. I eat a massive amount of vegetables. I eat them quite regularly.
Now, do you eat organic or do you just eat them?
Yes, so I'm a purist, and what I mean by that is everything's organic. I don't want any pesticides, herbicides. That to me is not from God.
Right.
I want it the most natural. Everything that I do, I want it the most natural way. I don't do processed food. I don't do, no processed food. And I eat a lot of fiber. In fact, the latest data is showing that fiber, so hydrogen is very anti-aging.
Right.
The fiber appears to be very anti-aging, and it helps with hydration because fiber is like a sponge, so it can carry water. Right. It can carry the minerals, and it helps the gut bacteria produce really wonderful gases for us. So the foundation of my protocols is super, super clean water, the best hydrogen in the world that's super clean also with no byproduct. And then it's a lot of these vegetables and fruits and nuts and seeds and beans and mushrooms, very little bit of rice, this type of thing. And then I eat fish very seldomly, but I do eat a little bit. But beans are another big one too that I consume.
What kind of beans?
So my favorite bean is, I don't know if you've ever heard of natto. It's probably the most powerful bean in the world. It has almost as much protein as beef.
That's what I wanted to ask you, because I think on social media right now, there's so much, eat a lot of protein. Yeah. Right? Yeah. You got to have protein in your body. Yeah. But if people want to be healthy, and they're eating pesticides or
Yep.
a lot of the meats that are out there and not the purest meats, right? Especially now. What are we supposed to be utilizing as that protein aspect? So I would love for you to deep dive into that one.
It's another one. See, I really do believe in God's creation so much that if you look at the human body is made up of, there's so many, I don't want the body to have any deficiencies.
Right.
So my research led me to show me that deficiencies lead to disease. And when I look at the body is a temple. What is a temple? The temple is like a house,
Right.
and it's a temple of God. And I wanted to really respect that as much as I possibly could. And so I started trying all sorts of different protocols in regards to food. But hydrogen, from what I found by utilizing it, it appeared to be helping me to be able to absorb more nutrients. And I started doing blood work regularly, and this doctor of over 30 years, she was a blood specialist. I just blew her mind. She said, I'm the only person. Again, it was really shocking to me. She goes, you have no nutritional deficiencies. Wow. And that's what I believe the house of God should be like. I think he designed us to not have any deficiencies, because when we have deficiencies, we know they lead to disease. If you're deficient in vitamin C, you get scurvy. You don't need a pharmaceutical to fix that. You just need to get your vitamin C levels up. So I believe in order to be healthy, we should have no nutritional deficiencies and be well hydrated and have really good gases as far as the two gases of life, basically hydrogen and then some oxygen. And it was really that simple. And the way it's transformed my life and many others has actually shocked me. I didn't know it could be so simple.
Wow, that's incredible. Well, we're right at the end of our show. I just loved all the information, and I'm sure you did also. I want to thank everybody and share this with your people. Share this with everyone that you know. I'm really excited. Be sure to tune in next week. We'll be talking more about this. We love you guys. We'll see you next time. Bye for now.